There are so many changes happening around the world and in our communities and even within our industry. And today I wanted to share some of the news stories that have caught my attention, and we can talk about them and how they affect you and your interaction with your clients. Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page. There are so many news topics affecting the wealth management business right now. Whether it's government policy changes, whether it's something happening around the world, whether it's something happening to companies and things that we can learn from so that we can apply into our own business. It's just a fascinating time to get information. And so what I thought I would do is every few weeks here on the podcast, I'd look at some of the news stories that really caught my interest and some of the policies that are changing our industry and changing your business and your relationship with your client, and perhaps some opportunities that you can take advantage of with your clients. There are literally thousands of advisors across Canada, and the things that are happening in your neighborhood, in your community, in your province that affect you and the relationship with your clients. And whether these are policy changes, whether they're just news, or whether they're how to run your business more effectively. But I'd love to talk to you about it. So if you have some things that you want to talk about, some areas in your community, some policy changes, some news articles, some things that might affect your business, I'd love to schedule a virtual coffee. So just go to the show notes, hit on the link there, and we can schedule a coffee, and happy to chat about the things that affect you and your client. So based on all of that, let's get started on what's on my mind right now. One of the things certainly that affects our industry is there's been a lot of news around CIRO, the new SRO, which is the MFDA and IIROC coming together. And we know we've had some talks on this podcast about that organization and what their mandates are and what they're doing. And one of the things that has been a very big positive is their paper on allowing the payment of commissions to corporations. So for those who aren't familiar with this particular topic and this particular industry, what has happened is on the MFDA side, so the mutual fund side of the business, you were allowed to direct commissions to a corporation, and that lots of benefits to that, especially in the Canadian tax system. A lot more deductions for a small business owner, a lot more tax incentives on that particular time. But if you were IIROC, in other words, you were able to do securities, you were never able to direct your commissions to corporations. And this has been a big, double standard in the industry. And as CIRO brings these organizations together, one of the things that they've stepped up and offered to do is now look at this topic and how they should bring this in to make it equal footing across the board. And they provided the industry with a few options that they're looking at, from registrable activities to how they do it with just a direction to somewhere in the middle. And they've asked each of the organizations to sort of comment on it and say what would be beneficial, what wouldn't. And we're seeing a lot of this come up. And in fact, I don't think, certainly whenever I talk to anybody on the security side of the business, really everybody, this is their number one topic, because of the benefits. And so, what do I think is going to happen? Well, I do think it's going to happen. I do think that this new CIRO is looking at the fairness of, you can't have a two-tier type of system, but they do want uniformity. And so I think that uniformity will come into place. I think they will have some more restrictive rules and oversights on how these companies are organized, how they're structured, who the owners are, how much percentage that they own of it, and then can you actually monitor any kind of registrable activity that gets coming out of these corporations. So I think that's one area in the news that certainly we're seeing a lot of attention on, but I think it's positive. And so I think this is one of the good steps that CIRO is taking to sort of equalize and make it easier to do business. And I know that many times regulators are criticized for their inability to look at what is the reality of the business and is that practical and I can do that for a client, and not do that for this client. But I think in this particular case, you are seeing them really side with the industry and bring a fairness around. So I think that they should be applauded for that. And I'd really like to get everybody's opinions on where do you think that should go. So, feel free to contact me directly and send me your opinions on that. The other one, of course, which is not as good of news, in fact, it's terrible news, is, the last budget. The last Liberal budget, especially the capital gains inclusion rate, which certainly affects a lot of clients and much more than we possibly believe. People have cottages, people have businesses, people have investments. Quite honestly, it's just another Liberal tax grab on what they call the supposed wealthy. I find it hard to rationalize that somebody who has really worked hard, who has taken their money, they've invested wisely after they've already paid an atrocious amount of taxes in the Canadian marketplace, atrocious. And then what really rubs salt in the wound is then if I invest it wisely and I actually get a return on my investment, I now have to pay even more taxes because I wisely put my money away. And really what it's saying is, what you should do? Just spend all your money. Take it. Don't try to save for your future. Don't try to save for your next generations. What you should do is, simply take your money and blow it. We're actually being penalized for investing our money wisely. And when you make investments, of course, into the economy, that propels the economy. Who employs people? It's corporations, it's small businesses, it's, these types of things are really what keeps an economy going. So this one has been, sort of a thorn in the side, but it is, from a wealth management point of view, an opportunity. Right? Now that we know that it's moving, the inclusion rate's moving up from 50% to 66%, over $250,000 of gains. This is actually a great opportunity for advisors to go back to their clients and look at all their holdings. And I do know that in a lot of cases, some clients have had these massive built-up capital gains, and they're very hesitant in getting rid of those investments because they don't want to pay the tax. And I completely understand that. But there's an opportunity now that there might be holdings that are not necessarily appropriate for where they are in their life today. This is an opportunity for you to, trigger those capital gains, maybe pay tax, but at least pay tax on a lower rate than you're going to pay in the future, certainly after June 25th, and then reallocate those assets, somewhere maybe more productive or maybe into something a little bit less risky, depending on the particular client situation and what they're trying to accomplish. So as much as it's bad news, and it certainly is bad news as far as I'm concerned, and I see no reason for it, but I do see that this is an opportunity for people who are in the financial advice to really step up with their clients who are in these positions and really help them during this time. So these are the things that, are important to me. And I think they're important to your business. I think they're important to the interaction that you have with your clients. So what are the things that are important to you? I'd love to have a virtual coffee and talk about them. Just go to the show notes, hit the link, and we can set up a coffee. The other thing that is coming up, and I was just reading the Globe Advisors Best of 2023, and what they were talking about was something that we're certainly seeing on a very, very, very frequent basis, which is now clients, especially higher net worth clients, are certainly concerned about how do I get my money to the next generation. Maybe it's to their kids, maybe it's to their grandchildren, but it's becoming more and more critical. And linked to the last topic that I talked about, which is the inclusion rate, now that conversation becomes even more critical. Like if you have cottages, if you have a business and you haven't crystallized on your capital gain, estate planning becomes even more critical. And specifically, estate planning and the use of insurance sometimes to offset the capital gain that is going to be owed. When you talk to people who have accumulated money, whether it's through business, whether it's through prudent investing, anyone who has a sizable amount of money, when you really ask them what they care about and what they care about the most, the general answer isn't about making more money per se. It's about how do I make sure that the money that I have accumulated, the assets that I have accumulated, makes it to the next generation and maybe future generations unencumbered. And this is a difficult thing in the Canadian marketplace because, as you know, when you sell an asset, it can maybe pass from spouse to spouse, but when it goes to the next generation, it becomes a taxable event. And in many cases, and we've seen many, many, many cases where that taxable event results in only one thing, is the sale of that asset. And again, whether it's cottage or a business or something that you would like to pass on, it ends up that you can't pass it on. The tax is too great. There's no liquidity to actually pay it. There's a fairness aspect when you have multiple children that you have to pass assets onto. And the one vehicle that people can take advantage of is the use of insurance in estate plan. And I know for most of my audience, I'm preaching to the converted. However, I do want to point out how important it is in the wealth management business to be very, very up to date on estate planning and the use of insurance and how to pass those assets on. And we're seeing it in the news over and over and over again. In fact, I was reading now, the seniors are the fastest growing demographic in Canada. They represent 20% of the population, but they represent something like 60% of the wealth. So we know where the wealth is. We know what their main objective is. And now, as financial advisors, we can give them advice on how to achieve that objective. So once again, it's a great conversation. It's a great conversation to have about how are you making sure that your clients know their options when it comes to long-term estate planning. And then the last article that really caught my attention over the last little while is there was comments by Howard Schultz on Starbucks. For many who follow this stock, I'm one of them, although I've bought and sold it many, many times, they had a huge earnings disappointment. And when you read Howard Schultz's sort of letter to shareholders and letter to the board of directors, he points one thing, and he points at the companies failing to focus on the client experience. And for those who have listened to my podcast, you know that I've used Starbucks as an example of a great client experience company. You know, it started in this little place, Pike Place, in the neighborhood of Seattle, and they created a coffee community, a place where you can come in. They took it off the cafes from Italy. They copied the same concept. They built sort of this franchise that would give people a great place to have a great coffee experience. And it worked. And from that one little store that they developed in Pike's Place, they basically replicated that experience over and over and over and over. And for those who don't know the story of Howard Schultz, and I'm a big fan of Howard, he's a true entrepreneur and visionary. Like, he saw this from way, way on, had lots of certainly trials and tribulations through the building of Starbucks, but he had one mission. And his mission was always see everything through the eyes of the client. How to create a great client experience. And he was, relentless in his pursuit of the client experience. And he stepped down at one point early in the career of his particular career. He stepped down, and what happened? The company took their eye off the ball. The company took the eye off of the client experience and started to look at earnings, started to look at how can we generate more sales? How can we do this? How can we do that? Shut down stores. Result, the Starbucks stock tanked, and Howard Schultz was forced to come back as CEO. In fact, he's come back several times now and resurrected it. And how he's resurrected the stock each and every time is makes everybody stop and think about what they're really in business to do. And that's to create a great coffee experience. And he's saying that now, even though he has stated that he is no longer on the board of directors, he is no longer CEO, he just cares passionately about this company that he has built and wants to refocus on the client experience. Now, I love this story because, as you've heard over this podcast, since I've started it, one of the things that I think is really important for all entrepreneurs, whether in the wealth management business or not, is to be obsessed with the client experience. Look at everything through the eyes of a client. How do they see it? What do they see? How do they feel? Will they tell other people about it? And so much of this industry is about, yes, giving advice and managing money and trying to get better returns. But the true masters of the business, the people who really make a difference, who really grow a sustainable business over time, are always the entrepreneurs and or the advisors who focus on the client, who focus on giving them a great experience 100% of the time. So those are my news stories, from, the CIRO and the changes to some of the things they're looking at, specifically the payment of commissions to corporations, looking at the changes to capital gains inclusion, what that does in the marketplace, but what it also does to financial advisors, the huge emphasis on estate planning and high net worth clients. As seniors continue and that demographic continues to be more and more worried about this particular topic, I think we are in a great position to step in. And Howard Schultz's comments on Starbucks on how you should be obsessed with the customer experience. And if you're obsessed with delighting the customer time and time again, you will always be successful. If you'd like to have a chat about any one of these topics or what's going on in your community, I'd love to have a virtual coffee with you. Just go to the show notes. You can find me there, and happy to get together. And I can't wait to chat with you on the next episode. Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over a virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.